My project title is A Field of Infrastructure and Walls. It proposes a new public space in Seoul that is 850 meters long with different features of infrastructure which are juxtaposed with walls that gives a possibility of unplanned usage. The research explores how the city infrastructure in South Korea have been transformed and used as a form of control in each period. Cheonggyecheon, the urban stream, has been situated in the center of Seoul since the 14th century. South Korea was in a period of conflict due to a series of wars which collapsed the society. There was no place for urban migrants to settle down, and the stream was a place for them to build houses. The stream could not serve its practical function as a main city infrastructure. The house became a contributing factor to the accumulation of sediments. Therefore, King Yongjo had a vision to restore the function of the stream, but also to mobilize labor to keep the population under control. The construction mobilized almost 200,000 people, and it gave people compensation as 60,000 unemployed people will provide jobs and wages. Several celebrations gave people meaning, aspiration, and compensation to the act of working. However, the stream was also used in many ways that were not planned, as it became to be used as a living space for sleeping, eating, and relaxing, and for reproductive labor such as cooking and washing clothes. Towards the 20th century, the stream lost its function as the water routes were cut off by demodernization. It was due to rapid development in the south of Seoul by the Japanese and huge estate development in the north of Seoul by the Koreans. So the stream was again the only place for people to settle down and became a longhouse. It was eventually evacuated by the new government's plan and transformed into a motorway. It reflected the government's modernized ambition to maximize flow of traffic. Modern houses started built throughout the city. People were pushed out by the modernization, which resulted in them using existing city infrastructure, and the motorway became to be used as an informal occupation. The motorway and bridge became to be a space for sleeping, relaxing, and working. It led the stream restoration project to be carried out by demolishing the aged motorway. It was initiated by the former Seoul mayor, and his vision was to redevelop the city and mobilize the labor. The project was to create a long leisure park in the center of Seoul. It was constructed as a new infrastructure, working as a spectacle and feeding the city's production. However, the allocation of elements in the park was carefully designed to promote and prohibit certain uses through different strategies. Different scales of steps that offer space for people to walk, sit, and relax. Stairs provide linear direction in parallel landscape. Plants are located at specific points to give a sense of relaxation by mimicking nature. Filtered water and fake ripping machines are embedded to create an artificial stream. Lastly, many history elements, such as replica of old bridge, existing overpass structure, are located to give meaning and identity to the project. Even though the project controls how people should behave, it also allowed a very mild version of appropriation, using outdoor space as an indoor space. So, this project led Seoul local government to capture an increasing tendency of misusing the infrastructure in different ways, and they started to promote in other new developments in Seoul. One of the projects was to supersede old overpass into walkway. Sleeping on the overpass became to be allowed as beanbags, tents, and canopies are provided. The government also promoted creative productions in the open voice space by funding young creative workers that allow people to work, experiment, and exhibit their projects. Existing bridge in the city was also used as a living and working space. It was allowed as long as people constantly work and rest in the way the government wants. As a conclusion of my research, Seoul local government has captured the tendency of people misusing the city infrastructure and start to encourage the idea of indoor activities to be happening in the outdoor space. My project sees the potential in this strategy and proposes to amplify the idea of interiorizing the exterior. My project is situated in Seoul. The site is a segment of the motorway. Currently, Seoul government has proposed a master plan of the park for the motorway. The project introduces constant linear flow of leisure and production in the open space by creating different zones such as the open field, lake, business plaza, and farm village that encourage people to use in the way the government expects to. The architectural characteristic of the park is that it is open, exposed, no walls that put people under surveillance, which leads them to be conformed to rest and productive in designated areas. And it does not leave any further opportunities to use in unplanned ways. On the other hand, my project takes the site as a testing ground to propose the public space in a new way. My project piggybacks on the existing strategy to amplify the idea of interiorizing the exterior. However, at the same time, my project makes a shift of disconnecting flow of space by introducing wall as a global element that creates a field of obstruction, which would increase the possibility of unforeseen uses. First, I want to talk about the elements in my landscape. My project takes a very similar approach to what Seoul government is currently doing now. The city always wants to represent the history of Seoul to give a meaning, reaffirm the identity, and promote the image of the city that they want to obtain. So my design strategy is to borrow, modify, and distribute different types of history elements. The statue of Korean mythical creature, Hete, which is known as Massacre of Seoul and a gatekeeper. Traditional bridge as a connector and boundary between the spaces, and a replica of Seoul Palace plinth, and lastly, Korean pavilion that represents nationalistic architecture. My project also introduces different types of ground condition and elements that are deployed from the city, such as stream, steps, garden, platform, and plaza, which suggests a certain way of use for leisure and production. However, a series of walls are the obstructions that I intend to distribute in a rational pattern to allow more opportunities to use in unexpected ways. At the same time, the form of walls is piggybacking on Seoul government's vision to represent the iconic image of Seoul, such as the skyline. So my project brings in its image that Seoul government wants to obtain through the form of walls by tracing and replicating it. Apart from its symbolic meaning, its dynamic elevation of walls also create a different spatial and environmental quality in the landscape. In addition, walls do not only work as physical divisions, but also as devices. Various utilities such as power socket, water supply, sink, kitchen, mist cooler, and office are distributed. Seoul is already promoting the strategy of providing utilities in the city to create the different microclimate conditions that allow people to use in the ways they want. My project deploys and modifies these utilities, therefore each wall has various arrangements. The walls can be used in different ways depending on uses and surrounding elements. In order to provide these different features of infrastructure, my project covers the existing underground motorway with concrete box beam structure that maintains the vertical clearance for the motorway. And the trenches between the beam boxes work as a container that allows devices and soil to be embedded. For example, some trenches are filled with geoform and lightweight structural fills to reduce the weight of the structure. It also works as a box containing trees and plants with drainage pipes to run under the floor. Lastly, utilities such as pipes, cables, and devices can be embedded in the trenches to support different elements in the landscape. So going back to plan, I'm going to guide you through my space. My project consists of 3 phases, and the obstruction of the space gets denser and clearer towards the end of the landscape. Firstly, it is an open space with different types of elements such as Korean pavilion, garden, platform, and plaza, but with no walls or utilities. So there's a limited potential appropriation of space, and people are encouraged to use different zones in expected ways, such as workshop in one area, resting in another area. Then, a series of walls are deployed that could deconstruct the elements. Various sizes of zones with different ground conditions are introduced, and they are encouraged to be used in unplanned ways with walls and different features or infrastructures. For example, the garden is no longer a healing space, but also can be used for farming by local people with a water supply or utilities like power socket, which would enable for workers to work and rest in different environments to the office. The walls are arranged more frequently towards the end of the landscape, which its idea of obstruction is maximized with a smaller number of openings that makes more clear disruption in the space. Again, many elements including history elements like a plinth and bridge are deployed, and number of various utilities are increased with the number of walls that would create a lot of unexpected moments and usage. For example, replica of Korean palace plinth is no longer going to be used as a national symbolism, but people now may interact with the surrounding features and use differently. People would be allowed to take a blanket or beanbags from the storage, or it may become a place for drying clothes with a nearby laundrette. Then I would like to take you surrounding context. It is the area that never gets to be used and only works as a boundary between the motorway and the surroundings. My intention was to bleed the walls a bit and go beyond the boundary, encourage people to bring these experiences outside of my infrastructure. Lastly, walls sometimes stop at surrounding residential and working areas that allows people to use in the same way they use in my landscape. Living and working spaces can be extended, therefore space can be used for communal kitchen, dining, or workspace in the exterior. In conclusion, my project piggybacks on Seoul government's strategy to use the infrastructure for leisure and production, maximize its tendency by introducing a series of walls that disrupts the flow of open space, that create a lot of scenarios that is not controlled. Thank you.